right, today we're diving into marketing metrics.
Metric.
So we're going to talk about the top marketing metrics if you're a B2B SaaS company, what those are, how to track them, and we're doing a nice, easy to understand language. Let's do this.
SaaS CMO Pro.
All right, excited to talk about this one today. My name is Bill Macaitis. I am the former CMO CRO of Slack, before that CMO of Zendesk, and before that SVP of marketing at Salesforce. So I'm going to walk you through some of my favorite marketing metrics to track. Maybe you're a VC, you're like, what should these marketing teams be measuring? Maybe you're a CEO, maybe you're a new marketing leader, and you're just thinking about hey, what are the right marketing metrics to track? I'm going to walk you through all of those today. So the first category is what I call funnel metrics. You're probably familiar with this, right? This is just simply, if you're a B2B SaaS organization, the amount of intent or people you have coming to your website, right? You're going to look at how many of those, convert into leads, how many of those convert into opportunities, pipeline, close business, right? It's generally a funnel metric. If you're doing it a little more advanced, which hopefully, you should or aspire to, you'll break some of these stages down a little bit more in granular detail. So as opposed to just having a lead, you'll have what's called a marketing qualified lead, or an MQL. You might have something like a sales accepted lead. That's when it moves over to sales and they accept it, or a sales qualified lead. The qualified just means that, hey, you're spending time and you're looking at this lead. You're trying to understand, hey, is this a good lead to use, right? There's tech and a lot of the marketing automation software out there. So like a HubSpot or Macaitis, and they will look at things like, hey, how much activity was there on the website? They'll look at firmographics, demographics. If you have a really good one and there's pure play lead scoring tech out there, they will look at literally hey, this company just came to you, okay, what vertical are they in? Oh, you've converted that vertical very well. Or they might go, oh, that company, okay, well, we've been, scanning their company's website and we noticed that they're hiring a ton. That's a really good signal, right? They're probably going to have more budget. They're growing fast versus a company that's on the decline. You'll look at a whole bunch of things, but the base idea is hey, we want to make sure that these people are qualified because we don't want to waste our own people's time, right? We don't want to waste salespeople, a very valuable resource. You don't want to send leads over before they're ready. You don't want to just say hey, do they have a pulse? They fill out a form? Great. We're sending everything over. It might make the numbers look good, but I think it's really self-defeating. And it also creates a lot of acrimony between sales and marketing because you get into that old, sales says all the leads are crap and marketing's like, well, you're not following up on the leads.
Why? He's got the leads. He's got the good leads.
So having these different stages are really important within that funnel. That's the first category that you're going to have there is these funnel type metrics for marketing. They can have their dashboard. They can look through it. One last thing in that funnel that I'll say too is you also want to look at, I think, not just, from prospect to lead, to opportunity to customer, but also beyond customer, right? I think marketing has a big role in expanding that customer, right? To making them become more active, to buy more plans, to get more seats, whatever it is, right? So in an ideal world, you're looking at that funnel as not just a, beginning and end point, but you're looking out through the holistic life cycle of that customer. Additionally, I think a lot of times marketing just stops at leads. And while I get that, marketing will kind of argue they have the most influence just on that portion of the life cycle. I really do think that marketing should look at the entire cycle. And not only that, but share these metrics with sales. Sales and marketing ideally are going to have some of the same metrics because then you're in it together, right?
We're in this together. I know we're in this together.
And marketing can nurture these people all the way through, not just a lead. They can help them nurture these accounts, these companies so that they become a customer. And after they're a customer, how do they expand, right? You're working maybe with, at that point, the CSM or an AE that's working on existing customers. So these funnel metrics are really important. That's kind of the first category that you'll see. The second category of metrics that I've used a lot in the past are brand metrics. A lot of B2B SaaS companies won't track brand metrics. I actually think this is a problem. We should be doing this more. And sometimes it is because I think brand a lot of times is run by maybe the most creative person, and tracking the metrics is a little bit more of a quant function. That being said, hey, you can track these brand metrics. They're not that hard. So at a high level, some common brand metrics that you'll see are things that are like aided recall and unaided recall. All that simply means is, so for Slack, for instance, so we would go, when you think of team communication software, which companies, do you know of? That's unaided. You don't give them a hint. Aided, you will go, oh, when you think of team communication softwares, which of the following do you know? And then you'll literally list them, like Slack and Microsoft Teams and HipChat and whatever it was at the time that you were doing that survey. So that's aided, unaided recall. There are things like sentiment. So that's like how favorable you perceive these companies. Sometimes you'll see, and we saw it at Slack, was we would have competitors, and we might even say like a competitor was like an old email client. And a lot of people knew about this. Maybe they all knew about, Outlook, but not a lot of people liked it. And they might not like that tool. So I think that's important to track as well as the sentiment, because I certainly think marketing has an impact on people's perception of the company and their favorability, non-favorability. That might be a good company metric too, right? When you're thinking about it holistically. But sentiment's a big one. You also have ones, online ones that are like, share a conversation, share a voice. This is the basic concept of, hey, when you're talking about social media, when people are talking about team communication software, how many times are they mentioning Slack as well, right? And you can kind of insert your own company there. How do you track these? So there are dedicated online social media brand trackers that will go out and track those last two. For aided recall, unaided recall, sentiment, we just did a survey. So we would survey out, we used SurveyMonkey at the time. We would survey a set group of target people. These aren't your own customers, by the way. These are just people that are, well, I take that back. They could be your customers, but basically you're going out and you're surveying and you're saying to SurveyMonkey or whoever you're using, like, hey, we want to survey people 18 to 55, college educated, have this title, and they'll go out. And so some of those might be your own customers. Some of them may not be. But sometimes I've seen companies that do these brand surveys just to their own customers, and that's not what you're going for. You can definitely survey your own customers, but you wouldn't want to do that for a brand survey per se. So brand's really important. I see probably 90% of B2B SaaS companies that I've worked with or that I just, know about in general, know CMOs like don't track the brand metrics. And I think that's really important because brand is a long-term play. It's one of those also that, marketing spends a lot of calories on campaigns, creative content, and that is going to shape your awareness, right? PR, these larger brand campaigns, like you want to be able to measure that. And it's important too, not just tracking these things, but do them regularly. So for funnel metrics, again, almost all of us will be able to say, okay, I know, how many leads I had this quarter and last month, and there's a nice chart. A lot of times for brand, what I'll say is if they do it, they'll just do like a pulse survey once and stop. And so what I really recommend is the minute you get in, right? If you're a CEO, you're just starting your company, start tracking this. If you're a CMO that you just got hired, start tracking this. If you're a VC, encourage all your portfolio companies to track this, but do it every month. Right. So what we did at Slack was like, I was the first marketing employee hired. I was the CMO and I was like, hey, build your team. But one of the first things I did was just start tracking these, aided and unaided recall. And what was really cool about that is we had all these data points before we even started, really started to try to move the needle on it. It's really tough when sometimes I'll work with a company that I'm advising, and they'll be like, Bill, like we're going to run our first big brand campaign. This is great. Okay, cool. Let's talk about that, pros and cons, and how to do it. But they'll have never tracked their brand metrics before. And so the problem is like maybe they'll start tracking it right when they run the campaign, but it's really tough then to know like, okay, you don't have any historical data points, so you're not really sure, did we get this result because of the campaign? Were we already at this result?
I don't know.
Anyway, having that historical data is going to really help you out. It's like we get it down to a point of awareness would cost us X dollars, right? We could really scientifically kind of understand when we ran these campaigns, like how that was impacting our brand metrics. So brand metrics, super important. Definitely track them. The third category of metrics that I like to track for marketing is experience metrics. Experience metrics are things like Net Promoter Score, CSAT. How long does our page loads take? Right? On the website, on the mobile. It's anything that like in marketing, when you're having a touch point with a prospect or customer, what is that experience like? To give you an analogy, like when I was at Slack, I was also a CRO at that point, so I was running sales and success and support. And so for instance, for sales, when someone had worked with an AE, we would run a survey after that and ask the customer like, hey, Alexandria was your AE, how knowledgeable was she? How professional was she? How helpful was she? How consultative was she? You can use whatever ones you want there, but the basic idea is like, hey, we wanted to give a good experience, a good sales experience, right? Because I think we've all had awesome sales experience with salespeople that are so helpful and they're on it and they're just guiding you through and educating you. I think at the same time, we've all had, kind of that used car salesman experience where, it just feels like they're totally pushing you and, pushing you to buy before you're ready. And it's just not a good experience. And maybe even buy the software, but you just had a really bad experience.
Look at the size of that trunk. You could put 3 bodies in there.
Experience metrics, I think, are really important because if you're marketing, you probably care a lot about how quickly your company's growing. And I would argue that's not in marketing. That's if you're a CEO, if you're a VC, you really care how fast your companies are growing. When you deliver great experiences, people tend to talk about you more. Your brand metrics go up. People tend to recommend you more. Your lead metrics go up. The experiences you have really define you as a company. And you want to track those. You want to track those in marketing. You want to track those elsewhere in the company too. Those experience metrics that I like to track were Net Promoter Score. Net Promoter Score is simply, or NPS, it's a simple one-sentence question. Hey, how likely are you to recommend Slack in this case to a friend or colleague? Score of 1 to 10. I love tracking Net Promoter Score because it's super benchmarkable. It's a very standardized question. Tons of companies use it. You can instantly tell hey, what type of experience are we delivering? Do we have a lot of people that love us? Do we have a lot of people that hate us, right? When you run a survey for NPS, similar to the brand metrics, right? You can just, find out your target audience, send a survey out to those people. Someone will be your customer, some won't. You'll get your NPS score, which is awesome. You can also ask an additional why question. So why? Why did you score us a 10 or a 1 or just, why did you score us what you did? And you'll get a ton of awesome info there and open-ended. And that's going to help you out. You can also, if you're good, you can actually combine that brand survey with the NPS survey. So, you are aware of Microsoft Teams. Okay, ask them the NPS question. How likely to recommend Microsoft Teams to a friend or colleague? You can know your competitor's NPS score. And that's really important. Again, in marketing, you want to improve your brand. You want to improve your leads, your pipeline, your funnel metrics. And having word of mouth, that is some of the best converting leads out there, right? When someone recommends it to a friend or colleague, it's super trusted. Anyone that's kind of in lead scoring is going to know that word of mouth tends to convert very, very well. So those experience metrics, again, whether using customer satisfaction, a promoter score, just thinking about your individual function, right? And the experience you have and being able to track that, like page load time or whatever it might be. I think that's another really important category of metrics to track if you were in marketing.
An important metric.
The fourth category of marketing metrics to track are PLG metrics, or product-led growth. Now, you might say, what? Marketing PLG? I thought product-led growth was the product team. PLG is defined a lot of different ways, but I actually define it more as people are just spending more and more of their time in the product. And you have to infuse your sales into the product, your marketing into the product, your support into the product. You have to make your product, more simple to use, more fun to use. So there's a whole host of PLG metrics. I did a separate video just on this topic, but at a high level, there are things like daily active users. How many people are coming to your app or your website and using it every day. You have things like a product qualified lead. So early in those funnel metrics, I walked you through a traditional B2B sales-led growth motion, right? You have marketing qualified leads and go to sales. In a product-led growth motion, you'll have something will go, hey, they may come to the website, but then as opposed to filling out a lead, you just send them right into the product. And same thing, right? You'll have a product lead, but then you'll have a product qualified lead. A product qualified lead might be, hey, they had X amount of activity in your app, maybe for Slack, hey, they sent 3 messages or some threshold there that they do before they become qualified. And that's important, A is a metric, right? Because marketing can do a lot of things to help these PLG type metrics. We can think about how do we get people more active, right? How do we educate them? Let's look at the sign-up process, what that looks like. Can we simplify it? How do we get them to a product qualified lead, right? Because they're more likely then to buy from us, either self-service or maybe at that point handing them off to a salesperson, right? That's really important. So you have things like, again, DAUs, product qualified leads. Sometimes you look at time to value. So you look at hey, when someone goes into our product, how long does it take them before they get that first aha moment? Now you could track this, literally count the number of clicks it takes on average for someone to get that first aha moment. You could track it as time, right? So here's the actual event. on average of all of our people are using the product, how long does it take them to actually achieve that event, whatever it is? But that's an important one too, right? Time to value, you'll see that. And again, marketing teams can help out there. Other ones you'll see that I like is how simple is your product to use? You could do this with a simple survey. Simple. You could do this with a survey that happens maybe 1 week after someone started using your product, right? That could be in the product itself, you do the survey, or it could be via email or other channels. And you basically say like, hey, how simple was it to use a product? Thumbs up, thumbs down. You'll get a benchmark, right? Whatever it is. 80%, 3%, 15%. Most B2B SaaS products are actually not easy to use. I think like the average B2B SaaS score was something like a -19, which is really bad. It shows like on the net, more people are not recommending you than recommending you. And a lot of that comes down to simplicity. So when I look at a lot of Net Promoter Score surveys, why people like companies, why they recommend them is they're like, oh, it's simple, easy to use. We have to remember that as end users, the average company, I read a study and it said they use something like 500 plus applications. Maybe it's the company uses 500 applications. Anyway, it's a lot. Imagine yourself, like count how many tools you use within your organization. Every one of those has a new UI, a new taxonomy, a new workflow process. It's hard to use this, right? So in my current role, I'm an advisor and board member for different B2B SaaS and AI companies. And a lot of times, like, I want to go in there. I just want to like, hey, let me use the product, right? And sometimes it's really hard to use, super hard to use, right? And it took a long time for me to get like that first aha moment.
Aha. That's it.
And you can see like how that's going to mess up a whole bunch of things, like all those funnel metrics. It's hard to grow when people have a hard time using your product, right? Because they're not going to talk about it. It's harder to get customers to renew. They're going to attrit, a whole bunch of things. Now, can marketing help with that? I would argue, yeah. Like, hey, we're pretty good at looking at conversion flows. We're pretty good at figuring out simplifying things, right? A lot of the stuff we do in marketing is simplifying our messaging, getting to that value proposition, really understanding personas, who our target buyers are, what their pain points are. We can go through and make it simpler. A lot of times too, the software or even like the sign-up flow was written just by developers. And I love developers, they're awesome, but it's not like, copywriting is like one of their super strengths, right? So you tend to see like very sterile and dry prompts, right? Everything is next, accept, cancel. There's no kind of joy. There's no like, fun to it or simplicity to it. So marketing can do that, right? You can help with that. And again, if you're tracking that metric and if you are bonused on that metric, you're promoted on that metric, you're going to think about it a lot more. So maybe your CEO listening to this, if your marketing team is only tracking leads, start thinking about this. Like, hey, maybe we should talk about brand metrics. Let's talk about product-led growth metrics. You're like, hey, I want to get into PLG. It's a much more capital efficient way to grow. Well, marketing can help with that, right? So how simple is it? Again, I recommend a very simple survey. How simple was it to use this product? Thumbs up, thumbs down. You've got a baseline. Hey, let's try to improve it. By the same definition, I think a really important one is how fun is it to use your B2B software?
Now we're going to do something extremely fun.
I know we're in B2B and I know it's like, oh, we have to be all just very boring and use acronyms and that's what marketing does. But I would argue, marketing is very good at making some delightful moments. Maybe put an Easter egg in there. Maybe when they finish, they're getting to that first aha moment. When they finish it, you do a little firework display, for whatever that was. They created their first piece of content or they got their first lead or, whatever your software does, right? I'm a big fan of Carta. One of the things they do is when you do you get your first stock grants as a user, you get this firework explosion, which is awesome. Like, go Carta, you did great there. You added a little delightful moment. They didn't need to do that. They could have said, all right, user 432 has accepted grants XYZ 439, next. But, they had a little fun with it. Do that, right? And you can measure it again. How fun is your software? How fun was the sign-up process, right? At Slack, we spent a lot of time on having our best marketers and people that really knew the editorial tone and voice go into the product and write that sign-up flow, write those prompts, help with the release notes, because again, that's a great experience, right? By measuring it, you can encourage it and incentivize it. Those are just some general PLG metrics. There's a whole host of them, but I definitely think like if you're in marketing, like that's an area where you can make a difference. And what I've noticed, if companies and their marketing teams don't track it, they'll spend no cycles towards that, right? Marketers are you're going to spend cycles to whatever you're being metriced on, whatever you're being, bonused on or hired or fired or whatever it is, right? If that's your metric, that's where you spend all your cycles. And you can see why you run into things where a lot of B2B SaaS companies I work with, they're like, yeah, we're doing okay, but no one knows us, right? Well, let me guess, your marketing team is not tracking any brand metrics, because they're probably not thinking about how they can improve that awareness. Or we tried PLG, it didn't work. Well, was marketing part of it? Were you tracking those metrics, right? That makes a big difference there. Okay, the fifth category of metrics that marketing teams, I think, should track are date-driven metrics. So these are things that marketing a lot of times is in charge of these big launches, right? We are doing a big launch. We have to get it ready by X date, or we're running this conference and this conference has to happen by Y date, or we're doing new messaging and we're going to finish it by X date. We're doing a new website and we want it to complete by this website, by this date. So anyway, date-driven metrics are fine, right? I think obviously I prefer have all those other metrics too and be using them, but date-driven is a way, it's kind of, you're putting your stake in the ground, you're saying, hey, we're going to commit to this. And it's something that's important because, you need to have, if you're doing a big product launch, marketing has to be ready for that launch, right? Or maybe they're combining with a big event. We did that at Salesforce a lot. Mark loved our events, and for a lot of reasons, but one of them was it was this forcing function. It was like, hey, we have Dreamforce on this date. We have to get the product ready to launch whatever we were thinking about launching by that date. Marketing, you have to have the new messaging by this date. We have to do the launch by this date. We have to actually have all the logistics ready to run the event by this date.
We have to start getting ready for this meeting.
So date-driven can be very powerful. It's the fifth category of metrics that I want to talk about today. Okay, the final category of metrics that I think marketing B2B SaaS teams should be tracking is stakeholder value. So what do I mean by that? Marketing teams, inherently, we tend to support a lot of other teams within the organization. If you're a sales-led company, marketing is going to need to support sales. We're going to need to help with competitive, with messaging, with leads, with events, just with wherever we can to help, sales, close this business. They're a close partner. If you're a product-led growth company, marketing is going to work very closely with product, right? You're going to think about roadmap, you're going to think about, competitive pricing and packaging, launches. You're going to be working very closely with your product team members. I would argue marketing also works with all these other teams, right? We work very closely with the finance team, because we have to think about capital efficient growth and cash flow. And a lot of times marketing has these big swings in program spend on what they're spending. And you want to work with finance. You want to be working with C-suite, all these different teams, right? And so one of the ways that I would do that, and this is one we did at Salesforce, is we would have a stakeholder survey. So what we would do is the teams in marketing that had these close partnerships with the other teams, they would send out a survey, maybe once a quarter, and they would just go, hey, how much value did I create for you, right? Or you could use some of those other ones I talked about earlier, like, how responsive was I? How helpful was I? Whatever it is. But the idea here is that, hey, marketing, you have internal customers, right? I'll tell you a story. What really motivated me to put this one in is I remember I was in marketing at one point. I've been in marketing a long time, but I was at this company and my laptop broke. And, when your laptop dies, that's really bad. It's really hard to do work. It's kind of like a high priority thing. So I remember walking over to the IT department.
Hello, IT? Have you tried turning it off and on again?
The guy was just eating a donut. I didn't get any attention. He's like, yeah, maybe I'll look at this week. And I'm like, I need a laptop. Please help me. And I could just tell, right? And again, I'm guessing that team did not have any type of, internal stakeholder value type metrics, right? It just didn't. They didn't care. It didn't matter, right? And we see this in our personal life sometimes, like we go to the DMV or just other, you kind of know when you're having an interaction where that person is not metriced or judged at all on the service or the timeliness or what that interaction looks like. I do think stakeholder surveys can be important. You can add them to your portfolio. Now, do you need to track every single one of these metrics? No. I'm kind of painting a broad category of what these types of metrics are. In general, what I like to do is, hey, maybe track all these, or track, at least one in each one of these categories. But then every quarter or every year, you're going to go in as a leader and go, hey, guys, these are the top 3 metrics for this year, right? Like we do that at Salesforce all the time. Mark was really good about that. We would go and we would stack rank, hey, for this year, here are the top initiatives and here are the metrics that correspond to them. And then you're going to shift your team around to focus on what those metrics are, right? It's another reason why I don't like giving a specific team, naming a team a metric. I'm not a big fan of naming a demand gen team demand gen because it's you kind of roped in that the only thing you do is create demand or create leads, right? So what I'll do in a lot of cases, I'll say hey, well, maybe the demand gen team really is just the team that does SEM campaigns or retargeting campaigns or paid ad campaigns, on Facebook or LinkedIn. And we'll say, hey, you are the paid advertising team, right? Now we could use you for some of our awareness campaigns. We could use you for some of our customer expansion, right? Maybe we're going to run a retargeting campaign to our existing customers to get them to expand. But it's important to kind of have that holistic viewpoint. So anyways, at a high level, those are all the different metrics that you can track. Think about it. Let me know from you guys, were there additional metrics you think I missed? Throw them in there. I know we threw a ton of metrics at you today, but hopefully you learned a little, and thanks for joining us. Hey guys, one last thing. So if you like this video, if you want to see more of them, head on over to SaaSCMOPro.com today. That's my official website. You're going to find there my full library of videos. You can sign up, get notified, be the first to watch new videos as they drop. Next, I've had a lot of people ask me, hey Bill, what camera do you use? What microphone do you use? So I've got a full list of all the equipment that I use on the website there. I found for me that really helps improve the professionalism for a lot of these Zoom and Hangout calls that I have with my clients. It took me 2,000 hours to research all this stuff, so you can just skip to the end, find out what equipment I used. Hopefully that's helpful. And lastly, if you are a founder or CEO and you're kind of curious, hey, what does a board advisor engagement looks like if you wanted to work together? Again, feel free to go to the website there, SaaSCMOPro.com. It's got all the information on how I structure those engagements as well as how to reach me. So anyways, you guys have a wonderful rest of the day and carpe diem.